Before the video begins, I need to give a couple of very strong warnings. This story is going to be one of the darkest ones I tell you about a while, and I believe a trigger warning is required. This video will contain mentions and discussions of CSA, COXA, gore, torture, and many other not very comfortable topics. Proceed with caution. Whenever people ask me how bad my life has been because of all the stories I tell you about all the kind of shit I've been through in my life, I wish I could tell them that this is just like my teenage years, that my childhood was happy and then things went bad. But sadly, not everyone has the opportunity to live a more stable kind of childhood. In fact, with me, it's kind of the opposite. The more back you go, the worse it gets. So yeah. You may even notice that I don't even have my VTuber model now. This story is just that dark. The ages from which this story happened is between 11 years old and 13 years old. So it's even more disturbing when you consider that's a very young age to be living this situation. Again, consider the trigger warnings at the beginning of the video because the story is only going to get worse as we continue. Now, I don't think it's shocking to say that I was bullied in school. I was very young. I remember being bullied from even before being 7 years old. I was constantly at a place that was harming me, and my first school is nothing short from hell. And I wish I was exaggerating, but no. I could make an entire video about that school, but just for reference sake, some of the things that you could expect from that school in particular is, for example, rats in the bathrooms of the children and in the kitchen, on top of extremely weird teachers that would talk in a very sexual way with minors, specifically teenagers, and they would be covered up by the director of the school. We would have abusive teachers, and there's even worse stories. Probably the worst one I remember from that school was the time a student attempted to kill herself, but that student was luckily saved. I do remember her hanging. I did get to see the suicide firsthand, and the school covered up by saying she tripped off the stairs. So you can only guess the kind of hell I went through when I was a child. Obviously, in a place like that, you don't get to even develop any kind of self-esteem. Again, I was the main target for multiple of my classmates and even other students from other classes. Sadly, my classmates had brothers and sisters, and they would think that it's funny to abuse a minor just because their sibling believes it's funny to abuse them. So yeah, not a happy start, as you can imagine, and this is only going to get worse from here. During this time, I remember being constantly trying to have a group of friends. I was autistic, and many people would never even think of giving me a chance, except for one kid. I remember I was, I believe, 10 at the time, and he was 9. He was a little bit younger than me, I believe, for a couple of months. We became friends for a bit, and after a couple of years, when either I was 11, I believe I was 11. The details of the story are a little bit, blurry to me too, because this happened when I was so young. But I do believe I was 11 when we decided to start dating. Now, admittedly, I never dated before. This was my very first ever boyfriend, school sweetheart, except that it had nothing of a sweetheart. This guy, I remember even before we started dating, he was like my only friend, and we had like a group of friends. And let's just say that Latino schools back at the day, around the 2000 something, it was a time where reggaeton was at its rise and the songs were very sexualized, so you can only guess the culture, even for children, was extremely sexualized. So I remember even from a young age, I already had an idea of what men would expect from me when I grew up. That's very fucked up to say, but it's just the truth. Before even that, I was already kind of treated like the dog of the team. I don't know how to explain it, but these classmates, which were all male, would treat me as if I was like the baggage they had to carry, because I was so alone and sad that they had to keep me with them. But of course, they made it look to everyone like I was begging to be their friend. Sadly, that's just what I came came to expect. Zero self-esteem in a school that just does worse to people. I do remember that this guy, my first ever boyfriend, started to do a lot of social pressure with that group of friends that I should date him. He had this crush on me, and I remember that I didn't really feel much back. However, I kind of felt pressured into being his girlfriend, and then I said, hey, let's just date. Because our parents didn't allow us to date, it was kind of like a yes and no situation, but eventually we dated, and the relationship itself was very toxic. I believe he was either 10 and 11, and I was 11 when we first started. I believe, I'm not quite sure, but I believe that's how it was. Around those ages. I remember going to his house constantly, and he would show me a lot of stuff, especially pornography. There was an anime at the time called High School of the Dead. If you don't know that anime, it's essentially schoolgirls being shown their private parts on camera while they fight with zombies. It's more of an ecchi than a proper anime, but everyone was sharing clips of it, and he would constantly annoy me with those kinds of clips. Now, as you can imagine, it's not very normal that a 10-year-old child to just share stuff like that. Outside of the over-sexualization that was in not only the culture but my own school and all the abuse that was allowed inside of the school, I do have my personal theory on why this kid in particular was so sexual at such a young age. He didn't have a father, and his mother was essentially this wannabe 20s when she's like 40. She was just cosplaying and playing video games, which, nowadays it wouldn't be so weird, but back at the day, you could see that she was trying to be like the hey kids meme, She was trying to fit in with the youth, and she would constantly have boyfriends which would break up and be with her. I believe that her boyfriends were very young compared to her, and some of them were a little creepy to me. I wouldn't be surprised if that guy, my ex-boyfriend, had gone through something very horrible with one of the many boyfriends his mother used to be with. That is my personal theory, but I never really knew anything. It could have been just the culture. It could have been just entering the teenage years with hormones. I don't know. But I do remember that I was heavily sexualized even back then. It didn't get too far outside of, him touching me and stuff like that, which, it is kind of bad. I do remember that back in the day, it's complicated for me to even talk about it, but I didn't really feel any kind of arousement. It was like, oh, you're touching me. I mean, okay, if you like it, it's fine, I guess. And I don't know, I never really thought much about my body or about me. Just for reference, I was already abused. I was already sexually assaulted by that point in my life. I was sexually assaulted when I was very, very young, and it didn't really stop at just one time. So you can only guess how much of a hell my life was even back when I was just a kid. So yeah, never really thought much about myself. Not that I had any kind of self-esteem to do so, but yeah. I remember the relationship continued. It was mostly kind of games, and him constantly telling the other classmate that they should bully me because he never felt any kind of crush for me, and I was this dog bitch that was begging for him to be her boyfriend because she was so lonely. Again, zero self-esteem of 11 years old me. I just took that for granted. Just thought that was what I deserved. Eventually, I turned 12, and this guy who was supposed to be my partner started to have feelings for another girl. I noticed this, and I said, hey, let's just break up. He immediately broke up, and like 3 days later, he was already dating the other girl, which it's very likely he was already cheating on me with. So yeah, I do remember not caring much. Again, I never really felt much to begin with. I thought that was normal back in the day. Just, I guess, not caring much for anything that happened to me and just letting it happen because I couldn't fight back, so why even try? I remember that, and I remember the entire group of friends was very, very fucked up. So my ex at this point, He was honestly kind of the only person I could really talk to. Everyone else was bullying me, throwing food at me, trying to push me down the stairs so I trip and fall and broke my neck. I don't know if that counts as an attempted murder, but that is kind of the stuff that I went through on the daily on that school. I was constantly screamed at, told that I should shut up and just take whatever. So yeah, I didn't really have anything to talk to, and it seemed like my ex and that small group of friends were the only ones who didn't actively try to hurt me physically or scream at me. So it was another kid that it wasn't the group. The group was different from the other group. It was my ex, another kid, another guy, the girl that my ex was having this relationship with, and me. This other guy, he was known to be a sexual harasser amongst the other girl students. He was trying to force girls constantly to kiss him. He did eventually force me too, but again, it's just one of those things that I normalized just to have a group of friends, any kind of person who would care for me. It is sad, but it is true. And this ex-boyfriend of mine with this new girl, I was friends with the girl. She was nice, kind of. She was constantly telling me that she was like jealous of people, and she even treated me poorly whenever I get to show any of my talents while drawing or such. She was always comparing herself to me, so another girl with low self-esteem. I remember one of the many things that happened is that this guy would constantly, my ex would constantly tell this girl that she was bad, that she was trash. He would do the same to me, but he would particularly say this to his girlfriend and then say that, you know, he was just joking around. Probably one of the things that I've had the hardest time forgetting, and it is something that I still see on my nightmares, is the kind of content he enjoyed watching. He not only enjoyed watching this very graphic sexual content, but he also liked watching gore, specifically real life gore of women. I remember that one day he came to us with his phone and it had a video of a guy who kidnapped a girl. He was behind the girl was on her knees, she was crying. He grabbed her head and started to cut the throat down the middle with all the blood splashing. At some point he grabbed the woman by the hair, started to spin her head around while he still cut her and completely decapitated her. This was in 2015, I believe, and you would think if there was a bit more blood, maybe it was a fake video. I still want to believe it was a fake video, but there's also part of me that believes it probably wasn't. It wasn't even that hard to get into those videos back in the day. The internet was a lot more dangerous than it is now. I do remember I was kind of like in a shocked state, and his girlfriend started to cry of seeing a woman be decapitated in front of her, which this guy responded with a hug, saying it was cute how she got scared so easily. You know, complete just a fucking psychopath. Even I have a hard time remembering every single thing he did. I know that he was constantly telling me that I was stupid, that I deserved to die, that he wished I would kill myself, and you know, it was one of those things that it could only drag you down the more you were be in that place, but I couldn't even escape. It was at my school, it wasn't something online. I couldn't really do anything, and I couldn't even talk to people. My teachers would be the first ones to harass me too, and I didn't know this at the time, but I was actively being groomed by a teacher at the very same time that this was happening. So, you know, I didn't really have anyone to talk to. I do remember there was this one thing that I had that would keep my sanity going, which was my art. Many people have asked me why did I begin to do art. I started to draw because it was the only way that I would keep myself sane in such a situation. I remember keeping like a small online portfolio of my art. I've been working on it for several years, and it was the only real thing I could look up to. Really, literally nobody cared, but there were a couple of people that, you know, I started to get to know online. I remember that I made my very first friend online, and he's still my friend to this day. He's actually very chill. I do want to make a video with him at some point, but even then, I didn't really trust the internet as anything. It was a place that I used to showcase my art and do very silly stuff when I was a child. I remember that I was very closed off from everything. I remember that back in the day I didn't even have like a phone. I believe that I was between 12 and 13. I didn't have a phone. I didn't really know how to use it though, so I only had my art to keep me company. Now, I don't think I need to say this, but the abuse was constantly getting worse. Do you remember being constantly told that I was worthless? And I was worth for nothing but to satisfy someone else. That if I wanted to die, I should just die, but that would make me selfish because I didn't thought of the other people that would be sad if I was gone. Essentially, it just translated to my head to, you must live to satisfy everyone else. Which would eventually become very dangerous very soon. I do believe 2015 was one of the worst years of my life. For many things that happened, between abuse of many other things. I was also sexually abused at some point. I remember that in the summer vacation of that year, I remember going to a park and having this guy be following me and getting behind a lot of the amusement park things, because we went to an amusement park and I was going to one of the attractions and this guy was constantly following me, getting behind me, sniffing me, licking my neck and touching me. Again, because I was already abused before, I didn't see any of those things as weird. That wasn't the only thing that happened, and probably the worst came in October, this very month, as I'm making this video. Perhaps that's why I'm making it, to try to get out what happened. So I remember that we had to do a class assignment together. So this ex-boyfriend of mine came to my house. We had to work together in a group project, and while we were working, he started to constantly say how pretty I was, how his girlfriend was not as pretty as me, and how he wished we would go back to the old times. And well, there's no really point in just beating around the bush. He did tell me I was worthless, that I meant nothing if it wasn't to satisfy people. So, with that very mentality, he raped me. It's something that took me many years to even tell anyone. So, it just happened, he left, didn't even finish the assignment, and I just could only shake and shower. Without him being satisfied, I had to do the entire group project by myself, and probably at the worst times, he saw that the only thing I really cared about was this like art portfolio. The only thing that was keeping me sane was that art portfolio. So, as a way to destroy me, because he hated me, he was very open about that, he hacked into this portfolio at a time that the internet was less safe when it came to passwords and such, and deleted over 3 years of work into art. Pretty much the only thing that was keeping me sane from that insane school, those insane things that were happening to my life. All of them destroyed in a second without any chance of it coming back. I do remember that because I didn't have a phone, I didn't know what was happening. He just kept telling me that he was going to take revenge on me. I don't know what revenge he meant, but the only thing that I can guess is that he tried to get me to have sex with him again, and I told him no, and I told him that I really didn't want him to do that again and to just leave me alone. The only guess that I can have that he was taking revenge on me is because I dared to say no. Came back home to realize that everything was destroyed, and it's hard to describe this. I did try to do research on what happened to me that day. The only thing that it can come close to what I experienced when I realized what was happening was that I suffer an extreme reaction to trauma and dissociation. What I felt that time was that I died, literally. I remember noticing what was happening, being in a state of shock, and then pure pain. I remember feeling like my entire body was involved in flames that were burning my flesh alive. I know that it was emotional pain, but the only thing I can really remember is screaming, falling to the floor, and trying to take my skin out because of how much it was hurting. Everything hurted. I don't really remember much else outside of once the pain was finally over and I could stop screaming. I felt nothing. Like, there was nothing inside me. I felt like I died. And in many cases, I have believed for many years that I've died. I do still, to some extent, believe that I've died. It was just pain, endless pain. Then nothing. Emptiness. Not a single feeling or pain left. Is nothing. I do remember my parents went to confront him. My parents only knew the basics, that he had deleted something very precious to me. I remember that I didn't go to school for like a day. The very next day that I went to school, I pretty much just grabbed him and told him that I fucking hated him and to leave me alone, that he was a fucking horrible monster and to never speak to me again. And the very next day, my best friend died, which was my grandmother's dog, which was battling with cancer. My only real friend was a dog, and it died the very same day. Well, the very next day, I guess you could say. To this day, that's the only real thing that still hurts. He died on 15th of October. In fact, this month was his 10-year anniversary of his death. Sometimes I wish I could have done a little bit something to celebrate it. Maybe I could still do a cover of a song that I've been wanting to do for many years now. But it's always a little complicated. 15th of October has always been a complicated date for me. Because that was also a very important date where something else happened, so October is a very complicated month. I don't remember much else. I remember that very same year I left that school and went to another school. It wasn't exactly because of me, but my brother, he was also bullied and it came to a point of no return with him too. So after many years of seeing that school was only going downhill, my parents finally decided to allow us to go to a different school. After that, I never got to know anything about him, neither my ex nor anything, except for the girl, but that was a complete coincidence. I remember seeing that girl again from that group of friends in a different kind of thing. It was like a very small Comic-Con, but very, very, very small, not like a huge event, just something very small. And she just went hugging to me and I was like, please get away, I don't like to remember you. I did get to ask her what happened with everything. She eventually broke up with that guy, and apparently she still saw him at school, but he was a completely different person. Based on what she told me, he was depressed and borderline suicidal. I did eventually get to talk with my mother about what happened, and she did tell me something. Like, I don't remember if she told me this before or after this event, but she told me that at some point she found my ex. This was after I told her that I was raped by him. So this happened many, many years later. She found him, she screamed at him for what he had done to me. I don't remember if it was my mother or my father. I believe it was my mother. And I remember that back in the day, I still blamed myself over everything. I thought that I was just exaggerating, that I was making things up. She told me that guy said, "Yes, I raped your daughter. I'm sorry." He didn't exactly say that, but he pretty much confirmed what he had done to me, that he was regretful for that. I never really knew how to respond to that. Even nowadays, I still don't know how to respond to that. But luckily, I've never got to see or hear from him again. I try to not think too much about many of the things that went through in my life when I was younger. And as you can see, my childhood only gets worse the more back you go. But I guess this is just something that I kind of needed to do. I needed to talk about this story kind of from as much as I can remember. There's a lot of things that happen in the middle. He was constantly trying to make me cosplay into characters that he liked from movies and shit. Obviously the male gaze. He was always with the characters that were made for male guy movies. And yeah, I do remember in particular this one time he wanted me to dress up as Ramona Flowers from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and he would be Scott. So yeah, obviously not the new version, but the version from the old movies. It's just, I wish I could like the character of Ramona. I really wish I could, but I cannot see that series nowadays. I am so sorry. I know a lot of people like it, but I don't think I can right now. I will leave talking about subjects. It's what made me survive this long despite everything I went through. So I believe that's it. I'm sorry for the very, very dark story time, but it's just one of those things that just happened, and you can't deny it happened. At least I can't deny it happened, or it'll just be worse for me. Being honest is what made me survive, so I believe I should continue to do that, even if it hurts a little. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.